This money will help relieve the burden on school districts. Every school district throughout the United States will benefit from this increase in special education funding, and that in turn will help communities retain support staff and teachers in the classroom. Because after all, Madam President, they can't cut back on funding for special education because that's a federal mandate. So what happens is they're forced to cut back elsewhere. This will help a great deal with teacher and support staff retention, and it helps relieve the pressure of this unfunded mandate. Other education funding includes $10.4 billion in Title I funding. This is funding that goes to school districts with high percentages of economically disadvantaged students. Another education portion of this bill provides $13.9 billion for Pell Grants, so that the maximum Pell Grant will increase by $281 for the 2009 school year and by $400 for the 2010 school year. I worked at a college, Madam President, prior to my election to the Senate, and I know how critical Pell Grants are for our low-income families. Madam President, that's not all. The $200 billion in aid to states also includes $39 billion for a new state stabilization fund to help state and local governments with other key priorities. Madam President, let me now talk about another part of this bill that I think is absolutely critical and which fortunately enjoys widespread support. Every state in the nation has a backlog of needed infrastructure projects that are ready to go. The engineering's done, the design is completed, they are truly shovel-ready. We are providing nearly $52 billion in funding to restore our nation's crumbling infrastructure. Of that amount, $45.5 billion is directed to a wide variety of transportation projects, and that is expected to produce $5.70 of economic benefits for every dollar spent, a tremendous rate of return. For every $1 billion invested in transportation infrastructure, up to 35,000 jobs can be created. So this is a real job generator. Under our amendment, the state of Maine could receive more than $170 million in transportation infrastructure funding, and that will result in nearly 6,000 jobs for Mainers. Madam President, this part of our amendment also provides $6.4 billion for the Clean Water State Revolving Fund and the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. Again, more example of unfunded federal mandates where we can help relieve pressure on states and communities while creating good jobs. Madam President, there have been many discussions about what should not be included in this bill. There are a number of worthwhile projects and programs that were funded by the House bill and by the bills as reported by the Senate committees. Programs that I have always supported that are near and dear to my heart. But the fundamental critical goal of this bill is to provide a jolt to our economy to get it back on track. So some of these programs, while they're worthy of an increase in funding, simply do not belong in an economic stimulus bill. And that is the test that we applied. Will it help get our economy on track? Will it create jobs? Will it save jobs? Will it put tax relief in the pockets of consumers? Those are the criteria that we applied. It is the regular appropriations process that is the appropriate vehicle for considering the funding for many of these programs that, while worthwhile, do not boost our economy. So, Madam President, our amendment eliminates $5.8 billion for health prevention and wellness programs. I support these programs. I'm a strong supporter of them. But it simply does not make sense to fund smoking cessation programs as part of an economic stimulus package. It doesn't make sense to include $870 million for pandemic flu preparedness. Again, an issue that I care deeply about because of my role on the Homeland Security Committee. Madam President, I would ask unanimous consent that I be permitted to proceed for 2 more minutes, if I may.
The senator from Maine. Proceed.
I thank the chairman. Madam President, we also struck, I'm chagrined to tell the senior senator from New Hampshire, $34 million to renovate the Department of Commerce building. Now, again, undoubtedly, there need to be renovations, but that simply does not meet the threshold for inclusion in this bill. I support many of these projects, but the stimulus bill should not be a vehicle for either my pet projects or anyone else's. Madam President, in closing my remarks, I want to emphasize that a substantial amount of the funding in our amendment, more than $365 billion, will be used to reduce the tax burden on Americans at a time when this relief is so critical. We provide also important assistance for those who are struggling most, for those who need an extension of unemployment compensation, an increase in the refundable child tax credit, and an increase in the earned income tax credit. We provide direct assistance to seniors, disabled veterans, and SSI recipients. And the amendment, very important, contains 3 provisions that are especially critical to small businesses because they are the job generators of our economy. They included an extension of the bonus depreciation and small business expensing provisions. Taken together, these provisions will give the American business community nearly $23 billion in much-needed tax relief, and I commend the Finance Committee for its leadership. Madam President, all in all, I am proud of the bipartisan work that we have done during the last 10 days. As with any major legislation, this bill is not perfect, but it can go a long way toward creating jobs and addressing the dire economic crisis facing our nation. Our amendment is bipartisan, targeted, and effective, and I urge my colleagues to support it. Thank you, Madam President, and I thank the senator from Montana.
Madam President.